Hi everyone, I'm Sabine Bilal. I'm the team leader for Group 2 for this week. I've been assigned Johnston's Chapter 3, the title of which is Never Mind. So let's move on. I've prepared a short presentation to walk you through the chapter. We'll start with the introduction followed by the different topics. The topics are cause and effect. Is making up your mind like making up your bed? What is really inside? What to do about mentalism. Then I've prepared the box summaries, and right in the end, I'll be presenting the question for discussion. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the introduction. What is this chapter all about? So, this chapter basically explores and explains mentalism and captures some more in-depth things like thoughts, feelings, traits, and thinking, and where they fall in the mentalistic explanations. Also, this chapter covers how mentalistic explanations basically distract behavior analysts from exploring the true reasons for the occurrence of behaviors. So let's start with cause and effect. This was the first topic, and while reading it, these pertinent questions came to my mind. Where does behavior come from, and what causes behavior? So there were two explanations given for this. There's one school of thought, which is the mentalist school of thought, which adheres to the belief that all behavior is internal. It is caused by something inside us which has no physical correlate. The other school of thought asserts that behavior is predetermined and is learned due to the history and experiences of an individual organism with the external environment. So, these are the two different schools of thought about behavior and where it comes from. So, what are these mentalistic explanations? So, if I have to explain them in a bit more detail, mentalistic explanations are basically what we are taught from the day we are born. So, it's everything that you feel, you think, it's all internal. So, what I've put down is this is the easy and comfortable explanation of behavior. Mental events are basically always going on and can therefore always be ascribed as a reason for acting the way one does. However, this point of view has some problems. It's easy and it's comfortable and it's something we're all quite familiar with, but it has some issues. So, the first problem is, can the mentalist stance be proven? Is there any evidence for this point of view? The second problem is, where do environmental factors play into the mentalist approach? The third issue is, personal experiences and history are discounted by the mentalist approach. And the last problem highlighted is that there is a complete lack of access to a person's mental events. So basically, at this point in time, if I ask you to prove the mentalist approach, there's no way that you can show me what's actually going on inside someone's mind or what they're actually thinking at that point in time. So here's another perspective. This perspective basically states that behavior is actually the result of an organism's interaction with its environment and the resulting changes which it has on the environment. So there's one approach, the mentalist approach, which says everything is internal, and this other approach or perspective basically says that behavior is the result of an organism's interactions with its external environment. I've put in an example which you can go over later to get a better understanding of this perspective. So, is making up your mind like making up your bed? This was the next topic in the chapter, and it had four subtopics. What is mentalism? The mind body problem. To mental explanations explain, and inventing inside causes. So, let's get into this. What is mentalism? So, mentalism is where the causes of behavior are all attributed to an internal mental universe and not to any physical observable dimension. And this mentalism basically states that mental events are the causes of behaviors, and behaviors are in turn the causes of mental events. So basically, this perspective holds that everything is internal and everything can be attributed to internal causes happening and residing within an organism. But this perspective raises another problem. This is called the mind versus body problem. So think about it. They've given an example of beliefs. Beliefs are something which can't be observed, but they have a physical correlate and cause a physical consequence. So how can some non-physical force such as beliefs result in a physical consequence? So this is the mind versus body problem which arises in mentalism. So the next question which arises is, do mental explanations actually explain? Saying that things happen and behaviors happen because of mental events is actually not really explaining anything. I mean, take the example of yourself. You can probably give endless reasons for acting and behaving in a certain way because you feel that way. But they're not measurable, they're not observable reasons. So mentalism, in effect, it distracts individuals, behaviorists and scientists from the true causes of behavior by providing a simple, unmeasurable explanation as the true cause. So mentalists say that behavior, as I mentioned before, that behavior arises due to causes which are inside an organism. So what did Skinner have to say about this? So Skinner said there are three inner causes, which are the neural inner cause, which attaches descriptions to physical variables in our body. There's a psychic inner cause, which refers to things which lack any physical counterpart, and the conceptual inner causes, which refers to personal qualities like habits, intelligence, which have no neurological or physical part. So then the question arises, what is really inside? This topic was again further broken down into 5 subtopics: public versus private, what about thinking, emotions and feelings, learning to respond to private events, traits, attitudes, moods, and all that other stuff. So public versus private. What are private events? Private events basically refer to everything that happens inside an individual which nobody else has access to. Public events, on the other hand, refers to anything that happens outside the body. So according to Skinner, the main difference between the two events was the amount of people who had direct access to them. So where do private events stand? So just because you have limited access to private events is not a reason to discount them as a cause for behavior. So what about thinking? Where does thinking fall in all this? So thinking was a bit complicated, but I'll try to explain it in simple terms. So everybody thinks, but how do you know people think? So you know thinking arises because of the verbal language associated with thinking. Thinking can be both covert or overt, verbal or non-verbal, but thinking is taking place. And so I just want to add here that thinking must be viewed as a behavior. Although thinking has no actual physical correlate, it must be viewed as a behavior in terms of the effects that it has on the environment. So moving ahead, where do emotions and feelings fall in all this? It's obvious that emotions and feelings are considered private. However, think of some environmental event like witnessing a car accident. That in turn leads to a private emotion or feeling of being scared, which in turn affects our future behavior. So emotions and feelings, although private and they're under the skin, but they have some physical correlate in the environment. So what I've put down is that even though emotions and feelings are largely private events, they are actually very real. In everyday language, we often make the mistake of associating emotions and feelings to mental states. We often offer mental explanations for feelings and emotions, but explanations for these must be sought in the external environment to be explained as behaviors. So how do you learn to respond to private events? Here it gets a bit tricky, because when you can't see a private event, you basically are attaching language to it through trial and error. Like teaching a child to express how they feel when they're hurt, it happens through trial and error. So if a child is holding their stomach, you assume that the stomach is aching. So you attach that verbal language and the verbal tact to the feeling of being hurt. And this is how slowly you learn to respond to private events. Where do traits, attitudes, moods, and all that other stuff fall into this? So once again, most human qualities appear to exist in a mental world. However, traits, attitudes, and moods are basically different social behaviors which are controlled and defined by verbal language. So in effect, these are also behaviors, which are being controlled and defined by verbal language. So now the question arises, what to do about mentalism? Here are the learnings from the chapter. So learn to recognize mentalistic language and avoid using it. Learn to avoid including mentalism in your language and references to it when talking about behavior. Learn how to reword, rephrase mentalisms so that your language reflects observable and measurable dimensions regarding the past, history, and present of behavior. And actively try to use scientific language as opposed to mentalistic language. So these are the learnings about mentalism from the chapter. So in effect, just to summarize it, basically what it's saying here is that as a behavior analyst, you must try actively to avoid falling prey to mentalistic language and try to use scientific language so that behavior can actually be observed and studied in a proper manner, as opposed to attributing behavior to a fictional cause that can't be observed. So here are the box summaries I've prepared. I'll just read through them for you. So the first box summary was molecular versus molar. So this basically stated learning history plays a pivotal role in shaping behavior. However, there's disagreement on how learning history should be examined. But the most agreed upon view focuses on immediate contingencies following responses. But learning history also affects behavior. So box 3.2, causes and gaps. So this basically stated that as individuals, we often try to overlook what happened in the past and attribute our behaviors to immediate mental events. But what you need to do is you actually need to look at all the influencing environmental factors that occurred across time, irrespective of when they occurred. So box 3.3 was titled correlation or causation. This basically stated that biological underpinnings should not always be seen as the cause of a behavior. Explanations of behavior need to be more than just the physiological influences that preceded a behavior. In order to explain behavior as more than just the biology of the organism, it is important to look outside the organism at environmental factors which influence the behavior. So 3.4 was you and your homunculus. So homunculus basically refers to that little person or voice inside of you, which most individuals use as an explanation for why they behave in a certain way. But since there's no evidence to prove this, it should be avoided. So 3.5, box 3.5 was entitled, is there such a thing as intelligence? What is intelligence? Does it exist? So it said rather than looking at intelligence and explaining it with use of a noun, it should be explained using variables which affect why individuals excel in certain areas and underperform in other areas. Box 3.6, does everyone think? In the absence of having the ability to look inside an individual's mind, can we say with confidence that everyone thinks? There's no clear answer to this. But a baby does not have a well-developed verbal repertoire, because of which it may be deduced that the baby does not yet have a developed thinking. So box 3.7 was Gilbert Riley's problem with mentalism. He was a philosopher like Skinner who had a problem with mentalism. But whereas Skinner focused on eliminating terms associated with mentalism, Riley was of the view that mentalistic terms can be used as labels for behavior categories, but not as separate entities which cause behavior. Box 3.8 was the private life of your dog. So this basically questioned that whether we have evidence to assume that pets engage in thinking. And it stated that without the development of verbal language, one cannot assume that pets think. The last box summary 3.9 was about predicting from effect to effect. Here Skinner identified problems in using tests to predict behaviors. Tests are used to predict behaviors under very specific circumstances in a controlled environment, which actually may not accurately represent a realistic situation. Prediction using tests involves an effect to effect because both the test and predicted performance are dependent on environmental variables which are not tested. So here's the question in the end. How can love, commonly referred to as an emotion or a feeling, be explained using a mentalist approach and a behaviorist approach? So I look forward to your feedback and hearing from you. Thank you. Bye bye.